What is up? Welcome to the DFS Academy for Week 7. This is Club Fantasy's weekly DFS show, and I have to say, this time of year is rather bittersweet. 6 games down in your fantasy league, and there are probably 1, 2, or even 3 teams. Their season is over. And this is when I start to remind people, DFS is always there for you. Even if you are down and out in your home league, you can build a new lineup in DFS, maybe win some money, maybe win $1 million. Let's get into it. What is up? Welcome to the DFS Academy for Week 7. This is Club Fantasy's weekly DFS show. I am your host, Ryan Weiss. With me, as always, Austin Amendolia. Good morning, Austin. A weird time for us to be recording.
I know. It's been a long time since we've done a morning show or morning record. And I got to say, it's kind of nice because, like, I have to really hype myself for those evening recording meetings. I'm more of an early bird myself.
I am also an early bird. If maybe me and you need to talk about a schedule change, we can discuss that off the air. Because I will say, like, on nights where we have to push it to like 10 o'clock, I am an old man. If those watching on YouTube can see the gray beard, I am useless after 10 o'clock. I record the Wednesday show. We went till 10:30 last night. I'm giving one-word answers. Like, it's just not who I am as a person. I always get hyped up for this show because it's just a conversation between me and you. But if we switch it to the morning, we could take this show to a whole new level. Again, we'll discuss off air. Guys, if you've never tuned into this show, welcome. We're glad to have you again. Maybe you're one of those folks whose season is prematurely over. We will break down cash lineups, GPP lineups, hopefully help you get better at DFS. If you want to play with us, if you check the links in the description of this video, also in any of the DFS articles we put out at clubfantasyffl.com, we have $2 contests going on both FanDuel and DraftKings that you're able to jump in. I assure you, I think Austin has won one this year. I think I won one this year. I don't know. It is not me and Austin taking these contests down. In fact, there are 2 other people constantly taking these contests down. We need you to get in there, help us out. These contests are not filling up. We got to beat these people, and I'm looking at you for help. Jump in, links in the description of this video. And Austin, also let them know if they just want to talk fantasy football, but specifically maybe do some DFS lineup construction with us, they should join the Discord as well.
Yeah, you should definitely join the Discord. The link to join that is in the show description, whether you're on YouTube or your favorite podcasting platform of choice. If you jump in there, we'll talk ball with you. We'll talk the DFS lineups. We'll show you what lineups we're playing for the showdown slates, for the main slate, and we'll help answer any questions you have. And to me, that's a really important part of the process because the lineup that I build on for these shows is rarely the lineup I end up actually playing on Sunday because information changes, even in that short amount of time. So make sure you jump in that Discord so that we can talk about lineups all the way up until kickoff time.
Yeah, I love that. We record the show every Thursday. Normally, we're recording it during the Thursday night game. Today, we're doing it Thursday morning. So information in these next 48 hours can change greatly. One of my favorite picks, I found out the weather's about to be terrible. So if I had time, I would have changed the show sheet. I don't, but we'll just talk about why staying connected with us in the Discord actually matters. Again, we break this show down into cash and GPP, but before we do that, we do a section we call Answers to the Test. We break down how Austin did in cash last week, but because I'm a degenerate, we also break down last week's Millie making lineup. Last week, Austin, they scored 227.14 points, and that is actually the lowest total since week 1. Week 1 was a sub 200 score. Everything else has been above this. So score came back down to earth a little bit in week 5. When I look at this lineup, Austin, you got Drake May, Josh Jacobs, Kyron Williams, Jackson Smith and Jigba, George Pickens, Kayshon Boutte, surprise, Michael Mayer, Rico Dowdle, and the Colts. Let's start with a New England stack. I think we were in on the New England game last week. We were certainly in on Drake May. I feel like this person, I didn't check this, had to have built a lot of lineups because I don't know how you settle on a Drake May, Kayshon Boutte instead of throwing Stephon Diggs in there. Obviously, it worked out well for this person. But then this was the part I wanted to talk about, and this is going to come up later in the show. Lots of chalk at running back. Austin, we talked about it last week. All 3 of these players, we talked about these guys, and they were heavily rostered, but it doesn't matter if you're right. Josh Jacobs, Kyron Williams, Rico Dowdle. He did do a small game stack, Pickens versus Dowdle, which made a ton of sense. But overall, this lineup, it played into a lot of the themes we've seen that are good about building a lineup. And he just hit a home run on Kayshon Boutte, as a lot of people have done with some weird players this season.
Yeah, exactly. It's the consistent reminder that you don't have to get that off the board to do well in these tournaments, even in the Millie Maker. To your point, Jacobs, Kyron Williams, and Rico Dowder, they were all huge cash plays. We'll talk about at least one of those players in a moment when we recap last week's cash games, and that was huge. And I think one of the big pivot points on the slate in general was whether you played Puka Nacua or Jackson Smith and Jigba, which we'll talk about again in a second. But for the Millie Maker, that proved crucial because when Puka Nacua goes out, this team had leverage. And I'm sure that that is one way that they were able to get different and move up the board. And then at that point, just having Pickens, Kayshon Boutte, and Michael Mayer was enough to be able to get different than everybody else.
I think another thing that you've talked about a lot, and I think I need to learn from this, and I didn't learn on my notes for this week, is you have often said, certainly in cash, that defense does not matter. This guy played up for the Colts, has no correlation to that game whatsoever, doesn't have JT, just pays up for the Colts, which is a weird decision. The Colts scored 4 fantasy points for him. It's getting to the point, Austin, where you're absolutely right. You start at the bottom of the pricing and find the team that isn't going to completely suck this week.
Yeah, or you just build the rest of your lineup and see what fits at that point too, because to your point, it rarely matters as long as they're not goose egging or giving you negative points. You're most likely going to be fine. Or actually, more precisely, if you're not picking a defense that is betting against your lineup in some way. So, like if you had played, I think the Colts played Arizona last week.
They did it.
So if you had played Marvin Harrison and the Colts defense, that just doesn't make sense because for one of them to perform and pop off, the other one has to fail to some degree. There are scenarios where they both succeed, but for when you don't have to do that and you don't have to put that kind of variance into your lineup, like just don't do it. And outside of that, defense doesn't really matter.
Yeah. Your lineup needs to tell a story. We haven't used that adage a lot on the show recently, but your lineup needs to tell a story. This guy's lineup, this is going to sound like the dumbest story ever. Chalk works. That's the story of this lineup, Austin. Sometimes chalk works.
So. Yeah, especially when you're getting that much chalk, because the thing is, like, people in these tournaments, they may pick 1 or 2 chalky players, but there's actually an interesting thing where by picking like all of the chalk, you getting
become
more
not
different.
Chalk. That's so funny. That's exactly right. So, all right, Austin, let's move off of the Millie Maker lineup. Neither one of us is a millionaire after last week. However, you had a great week in cash.
I did have a great week in cash. I went 100% in head-to-heads, won every single head-to-head contest I was in, which is really great because it had been a slow start to the year for me. It brings me back to 31% in head-to-heads on the year. I ended up pivoting to Drake May, which was huge. There was a big decision point between Trevor Lawrence and Drake May. Drake May was more expensive than Trevor Lawrence, but he paid off that salary, scoring about 7 more fantasy points on DraftKings than Trevor Lawrence. It also, because I paid up for Drake May, that is why I landed on Jackson Smith and Jigba and not Puka Nacua, which was honestly one of the huge pivot points of this week. Because if we look at the rostership percentages on DraftKings and the $25 double up that I play, the top 5 rostered players was Rico Dowdle at 76%, Puka Nacua at 62%, Rachaad White at 62%, Javonte Williams at 58%, and JSN at 58%. Nacua failed because he exited the game. Javonte Williams failed. And Rachaad White, he didn't fail per se, but he didn't do enough for it to
I feel like he barely doubled his salary. Like it wasn't a great week for him. So
exactly. So having someone like Christian McCaffrey in my lineup and being able to have that upside, he was only like 30-40% rostered. I think that was like a pivot point that actually really benefited me. So it worked out really well. The other thing is, even though I paid up for Drake May, I still was able to play JSN and CMC because Michael Mayer opened up at tight end because of the injury to Ashton Genty, and that was another crucial move on the week, was paying down for Mayer.
And that's the last couple of points. I like to be transparent with these as well. I did switch to my new strategy, Austin. It did not work. I am not a millionaire, and I put in $10 in the. I put the giant head-to-head, the $10 one instead of the 25 this week. And then I did 5 $2 head-to-heads. I lost everything in cash is what I'm getting at. So not a great week for me. And again, when I say I lost everything, folks, I play about $40 of DFS every week. I'm not a huge DFS guy. And again, I don't want to say that $40 isn't huge. For some folks, that's a very big investment. But again, I'm not maxing any contest. If you don't know my strategy, I buy a $20 Millie Maker lottery ticket every week, and then I try to put enough that I will win $20 in cash and head-to-head. So that way, when I don't win $1 million, at least the ticket was free the last 2 weeks. That has not worked out. But Austin, I did gamble on Rico Dowdle repeating, but unfortunately, I got really into your lineup, and I built all my lineups around Puka, Dowdle, and CMC, and Puka let me down. I lost every contest by about 10 points, to where if I had JSN instead of Puka, it would have been an easy win. So.
Yeah, that's a rough one. What I will say, to your point on your strategy, even though it wouldn't have worked out for you last week, I did learn a valuable lesson this past week with cash. I put my cash lineup in a tournament as well, because it was like, what happens if my cash lineup pops off? I'm not benefiting from that in tournaments as well. So I just put it in a $1 100 contest. And then placed third out of 100. So, it's only a $7 gain, but it's to give the lesson like, hey, it's also worth just throwing your cash lineup into one tournament lineup, because if you hit that week and other people fail, like, you could end up actually, continuing to enhance the value that you're getting from that cash lineup.
There we go. Let's get back into cash. This is Austin's specialty. This is where we start the show, and we start with what we call top of the class. These are the expensive players. As I always remind you, when we talk price, we're almost always talking DraftKings. That is our kind of platform of choice. I still play a little bit on FanDuel, and obviously we have the contest on FanDuel. But when we're talking these prices, we're talking DraftKings, which usually means they're far more expensive on FanDuel. So these are the players priced above $8,000. You got one this week, Austin, and I think he is the one. So.
Yeah, and I will say I have one this week because I wanted to keep this segment on the show sheet. I don't know that I'll actually play Jonathan Taylor this week.
Interesting.
But if I am paying up for somebody and paying $8K or more, it is going to be Jonathan Taylor. He only has 2 games this year with fantasy performances at 15 points or below. Everything else has been 26 plus points. He has hit the 30-point mark 3 times. He has been so dominant. Having Daniel Jones in the backfield has not harmed him at all. So he is definitely as reliable as they come at running back. I don't know that you have to pay up for him in order to have a good cash lineup, because there are some other really good running back options this week. But if you were looking for that price range, Jonathan Taylor is pretty much the only player I feel comfortable paying up for this week.
I think that's fair. The other thing you didn't really hit on that, I know you do your matchup tool and I do the matchup article. Chargers are bleeding points to running backs. Certainly in the last 2 weeks, they have allowed back-to-back games with running backs scoring 2 touchdowns. On our Wednesday show, I do a little prop every week of the player I think is going to score 2 touchdowns. I said, why can't Jonathan Taylor make it 3 weeks in a row for the Chargers? So I like the matchup a lot. I do agree. Price, certainly on FanDuel, he's hitting that 10K number, which is going to scare a lot of people off there. So he's going to make it really hard to build lineups around him this week, Austin. But I mean, man, I just feel like he's the chalk worth eating. But my God, you got to eat a lot of chalk.
Yeah, well, and I think we'll get into that a little bit in the tournament section, because I think his price makes him a little bit interesting in tournaments.
There we go. Moving on. Next section, we call the band nerds. They spend a little bit too much time practicing those instruments to be top of the class. These are the mid-tier players, $6,000 to $8,000. And Austin, you got it broken down by position for me this week.
Yeah, I had to do that because I just kept adding players and adding players and adding players, and I was like, okay, I've got to figure out a way to organize.
Yeah, I was gonna say this might be the longest section of the whole show.
So we'll just start out at quarterback. I think it's very worth paying up for Jaden Daniels this week. We haven't had a lot of clear elite quarterbacks on the main slates here recently, especially the ones with the rushing upside. And it's the strategy this year has largely been paying down at quarterback, in part because Drake May has been so great at his price point, but he is getting priced up. He's getting more expensive, and his matchup this week isn't exactly beautiful. So I'm actually looking towards Jaden Daniels this week because he's playing the Dallas Cowboys. And
his matchup is beautiful.
Exactly. His matchup is incredible. The Dallas Cowboys on the season are allowing an average of 27 points to quarterbacks per game. That is 3 points more than the next worst team in the Miami Dolphins. They are still just continuing to be far and away the best matchup for quarterbacks. And Jaden Daniels is a quarterback that can get there. He can run the ball. He can run, scramble, and he's still getting the job done through the air with beat up pass catchers. So I feel really good about going with Jaden Daniels this week. I will likely just be parking him in my cash lineup spot. I do think you can still consider people like Drake May, but there's not a lot of cheap quarterback options this week that I feel really confident in their matchup. So I am likely just paying up for Jaden Daniels so I don't have to think about it.
No, I think that's absolutely fair. No notes. If you can attack Dallas and if you can afford to attack Dallas, attack Dallas.
Yeah, exactly. So in this price range too, there are 3 running backs that I think are all very viable this week. You've got Rico Dowdle at 6,800 on DraftKings, 78 on FanDuel, Jordan Mason at 6,200 on DraftKings, 6,900 on FanDuel, and Javonte Williams, who's at $6,700 on DraftKings, $7,500 on FanDuel. All 3 of these guys are getting really good volume. Rico Dowdle in particular, he's been getting like 30 touches a game in these last 2 games. So if Chuba Hubbard sits again, Rico Dowdle is going to continue to be a good cash spot just because of that ridiculous level of volume. I almost don't care about the matchup at this point because of how much volume he is getting. Jordan Mason, on the other hand, he's got a decent matchup this week and has been getting the run. He's going up against the Philadelphia Eagles this week, who in recent weeks have been struggling a little bit more against running backs. And so I like going that direction for Jordan Mason. And then Javonte Williams, we've seen him getting good volume, both in the pass game and the run game. So again, it's just a volume play. All 3 of these running backs I think are perfectly fine to go with. And I think you can make a lineup with just 2 of these 3. I don't think you need to pay up for Jonathan Taylor, especially if you're paying up for Jaden Daniels at quarterback. But these 3 guys, I think, should all be in your cash pool.
Yeah, I think Jordan Mason's kind of a forgotten man. They're coming off of that bye week. They've been over in England for the last couple weeks, so folks haven't seen them because they've been playing at 9:30 in the damn morning, Eastern time anyway. And he still has no competition. Aaron Jones is at least one more week from coming off of the IR. So this is going to be the Jordan Mason show. And as you've mentioned, Philadelphia has been getting beat. They're giving up a ton of touchdowns to running backs. This should be a competitive game with Minnesota. I think Jordan Mason at that price point is a forgotten player that's going to be really nice in cash. I don't know that he has the Cam Scatabo 3 touchdown upside like we saw last week. So I don't know that I'm going to be forcing him into any GPP lineups, but I think he's a great play in cash this week.
Yeah, and just to double down on that point, I mean, on the season, Philadelphia is allowing the 16th most points to the running back position. But over the past 4 weeks, since week 3, they're allowing the 4th most. So they have definitely given up more points in recent weeks than they have on the season.
There you go. And you got 3 more receivers for us.
Yeah, 3 receivers. All of these guys kind of fit a similar, 2 of these guys fit a similar category that we typically go to. And then 1 is a little bit kind of conditional. So first we have Roma Dunze. Volume hog. He didn't get as much volume as you would expect in that primetime game, but he almost scored a touchdown, which if he had scored that touchdown, like you would have felt fine with his fantasy performance, right? Like he probably would have won me a tournament, frankly, if he had scored that touchdown.
He probably would have put me in the cash if he had scored that touchdown.
Yeah. So I really would have loved that, but didn't happen. I still like the volume he's getting, though, and it's a good matchup for them. Jalen Waddle, similar deal. No Tyreek Hill. He's just getting a ton of volume, and at 6,300, like he's not expensive enough yet for the volume he's getting. The other receiver in this price range that you should be looking at is George Pickens, because he has been continuing to get a ton of volume with CeeDee Lamb out of the lineup. And so that said, this is conditional on there being no CeeDee Lamb in the lineup. There's a potential that he returns. He's currently listed as questionable. So we're doing this before we get Thursday injury reports. So we'll have to see what happens over the next couple of days. But it's only to say, like, you should have George Pickens as one of your considerations for cash this week.
So when we did our start sit questions last night, we were letting folks know that Pickens is not conditional on CeeDee Lamb. So this is an alternate messaging. But Austin, I agree with you, because there's one thing that you have to take note of in DFS, and this was wild to me as I was looking at my rankings. Pickens and Lamb are the number 2 and 3 priced up players in both slates right now. They are pricing Pickens because they don't know what to do with Lamb. I'm not saying Pickens might not have a good week, but at his price point, he needs to be the alpha. And if Lamb is back, I can't guarantee that George Pickens is even doubling his production. He should have a good week, but I can't guarantee that 2x on his price point when his price point is so high.
Yeah, and I think the way to think about it for DFS is if CeeDee Lamb plays, George Pickens, or let's start with if CeeDee Lamb doesn't play. If CeeDee Lamb is out, George Pickens is a cash play because he's going to
100%.
get the volume. If CeeDee Lamb does play, George Pickens is the tournament play because he has the upside still, and CeeDee Lamb might be a slow start, but he might go lower rostered because people will think, oh, well, CeeDee Lamb is back. Pickens is going to go back to his old ways.
No notes. That's exactly what there's one last thing I want to bring up, and this was going to kind of be my whole spiel with Caleb Williams, but we need to talk about it because of Rome Odunze, and we need to talk about it in the next section because of Chris Olave. One of our listeners pointed out they are calling for weather in Chicago this week. And so they are saying right now we could be talking about rain and 25-mile-per-hour wind gusts. In cash, Austin, is that enough to pivot you off of this game completely?
It will pivot me off of the receivers a little bit more. So I will look to probably move somewhere else off of the Odunze in that case, just because the wind in particular is what gets me. I don't really care as much about downpour, but when there's a ton of wind, that tends to be what's more disruptive to quarterbacks, especially just because I don't think we've seen Caleb Williams have one of these sloppy games yet. And so there's some quarterbacks that I'm like, I don't care. Like Josh Allen, he's got the arm strength, and I've seen it, him in this, like, chunk the ball in the snow, where I'm like, I don't care how bad the weather gets. I feel like he's going to be pretty good at getting the ball to his pass catchers. With someone like Caleb Williams and Spencer Rattler, I'm like, I haven't seen it yet, so I want to see how they handle that kind of condition.
And I'll actually throw the counterpoint to you, what you just said. While we haven't seen Caleb Williams fight through wind, and that matters in Chicago, I remember, I think it was week 1 last year, everyone moved away from San Francisco, Chicago because of some rain, and that ended up being a great game fantasy-wise and for DFS. So don't let the rain necessarily scare you, but wind is what you should pay attention to. I love that piece of advice. As we move on, we got bookworms. These are the value plays. We're talking 4,000 to 6,000 over there on DraftKings. Easily underestimated, but they could surprise you this week. You got 3 of them for me, Austin.
Yeah, and they're all 3 receivers, and two of the receivers have been in this category a lot this year.
So these could be your Rome Odunze pivot plays. So.
Exactly. So you have Chris Olave, first off, who is $5,400 on DraftKings, and then Keenan Allen is $5,500 on DraftKings. They're both $6,200 on FanDuel. These guys just continue getting volume, and I think Allen has had a little bit less pop in recent weeks, but I'm not really concerned about that. I think he's getting enough target volume that he should continue to be in your cash pool. And so I'm really just looking at these guys to remain those kind of consistent receivers that we've been seeing so far. The other player that's it's a new addition to the show this week is Jordan Addison. This is the first time we've mentioned him so far, I think, this year.
That's because he was suspended and then in London. We've never even had an opportunity to talk about him yet. So.
That is accurate. He is $5,100 on DraftKings, $6,100 on FanDuel. He's been getting a really good amount of target volume since returning from his suspension, which is making me interested in him. He has gotten 8 targets and 6 targets in each of his first 2 games. So not necessarily hitting that double-digit target mark consistently the way Chris Olave is, but he's only $5,100, and at that price point, I'm like, he's getting enough volume that I feel pretty good about it in a matchup against Philadelphia that will be tough. So like that might be a reason to pivot off of him, but he is someone that I am contemplating given the amount of volume he's getting in this offense so far.
Do you care who the quarterback is? Because I'm reading JJ McCarthy is looking less likely to go. Josh joked last night it's a Carson Wentz revenge game.
Yeah, I will prefer it if it's Carson Wentz, because it's Carson Wentz who's been giving him this volume, and we really haven't seen a lot of JJ McCarthy and Jordan Addison together. So we might look to pivot if JJ McCarthy plays, but it's not like I don't think it will be a big difference because I think it's the same offense, and I feel like the way Minnesota plays this is just like whoever their quarterback is, they're just dropping into a system more so than other teams. Like I feel like Buffalo is a different situation where the offense is about Josh Allen, Minnesota less so. So I don't feel like completely avoid Jordan Addison in that case, but I definitely will probably downgrade him in that case.
There we go. We wrap up cash with my favorite category, C's Get Degrees, the punt plays of the week. At first off, sounds like, damn, you got a lot of players in this section, but really you're just giving us a lot of choices at tight end.
Yeah, exactly. So I'll start with the tight ends. There's just several different ways to go, and it kind of depends on what happens with injuries throughout the week. So if David Njoku does not play, Harold Fannin is then a really great option. He had a ton of target volume last week with Dylan Gabriel, so I love going that route. If Brock Bowers does not play, go back to Michael Mayer. He's not been priced up significantly from last week. Also, Garrett Wilson is doubtful to play for the New York Jets. Mason Taylor had a down week in terms of volume last week, but if Garrett Wilson is sitting, like, I don't know who else to throw in the ball to. So I like going back to Mason Taylor. Basically, the point at tight end this week is like there are several options if you want to pay down. You can save money with either Fan and Mayer or Taylor. If for some reason the injury reports don't make it so that one of these guys is opened up, I think it's worth them paying up for Trey McBride, Jake Ferguson, or Tyler Warren because they're going to be that solid. So it's just to say, like, that's going to be one of your pivot points this week is whether you save or spend up at tight end.
Yeah, I'll add a note on Mason Taylor because he happens to be my stream of the week tight end. We always joke that these coincide with one another. Before that dud last week where Justin Fields was just awful, Mason Taylor was averaging 8 targets per game over his previous 3 games.
Yeah.
And I don't think we can discount, and I'm probably overreacting on Justin Fields. I've been a hater this entire week. We can't underreact to the fact that he was facing the Denver defense and now moves on to the Carolina defense. Like, very, very different scenarios. Plus, Fields is at home this week. Carolina is just awful against tight ends. And I think there's something to who else is Justin Fields going to throw to.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of matchup factors related to Justin Fields and his performance, like how tough of a defensive front is he going up against? How tough are the pass catchers? Do they play a lot of man coverage or do they play a lot of zone coverage? Because Justin Fields isn't really a guy that's going to like throw to a lot of contested catches. He really wants receivers to be super open, to feel comfortable. So that's not Denver's game. They played a lot of man last week. They were really making it hard on those pass catchers. I think it's going to be a different story with the Carolina Panthers this week.
There you go. You got a wide receiver that I'm going to guess most of our audience has never heard of.
Yeah, I've barely heard of him, frankly. Robert Flournoy, who is $3,900 on DraftKings.
You got the last name right. It's Ryan, though. Ryan Flournoy.
Ryan. Oh, jeez. I feel like there used to be a Robert Flournoy.
There may have been, but yeah, I Ryan Flournoy is a guy who in Dynasty, a lot of smart people told me to pay attention to. So he's on a bunch of my taxi squads. I tried to sell him after that big week 2 weeks ago and could not move him whatsoever. So.
Yeah, it turns out that Robert Flournoy is a member of the Georgia House of Representatives.
There you go.
So
it's your Atlanta Braves fandom.
Yeah, I was about to say something about having been raised in Georgia rang a bell for me.
I love that.
Anyway, so Ryan Flournoy, it's if there's no CeeDee Lamb, he's a really great punt play, especially if you don't play George Pickens. Like, he is $3,900 on DraftKings. He's getting enough volume that he can pay that off pretty easily. And if you're paying up at tight end, you're paying up for Jaden Daniels at quarterback, you are going to have to find some place to save salary. And he's a really easy way to do it. And I feel like a really reliable way to do it.
Yeah. Unlike George Pickens, he is 100% A if CeeDee Lamb does not play though.
Yeah, exactly. If CeeDee Lamb does not play, then you can play him. I will say at defense, the last player I have in this category is the New England Patriots defense. They are interestingly the most expensive defense on FanDuel. So I think it's worth still just paying up because they're going up against the Tennessee Titans. I do sort of worry about like the coach firing bounce back that we often see with teams, and like the Titans come out fighting because their coach just got fired. But that's the offensive line is rough. Cam Ward's taken a lot of sacks and had a lot of mistakes to start out. So I'm going to continue betting against the Tennessee Titans.
And you're looking at a scenario where Calvin Ridley's likely to miss this game. So a team that didn't have many weapons is down a weapon. I agree with this one. New England, easy pick. And while they're the 4th most expensive on DraftKings, they're a little bit easier to swallow on DraftKings than they are on FanDuel at that $5K.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that.
All right, folks, that wraps up the cash section, and now we break down to tournament talk. It's time to talk some GPP. We have this section broken down by position, and I actually jump in here and give some of my favorite plays as well, and Austin will tell me why we are right or wrong. Austin, starting with the quarterbacks, you have two of the best as your top plays this week. You think this might be a week to maybe I'm going to call it eat a little chalk at quarterback. So.
Yeah, well, and also just to pay up a little bit. So I do think Jaden Daniels is an interesting tournament play this week, but I also want to look at the other side of that matchup with Dak Prescott, who is $6,500 on DraftKings, $8,300 on FanDuel. He's just been really good and really consistent. He has been making this offense work, even despite all of the chaos going on around him.
Yeah.
Particularly on the defensive side of the ball. He's got 3 straight weeks of 20 or more DraftKings points and 3.3 performances this year of 25 or more DraftKings points. This is the highest game total on the slate. It's at 54.5. Expected to be a lot of offense happening in this matchup. So I like looking at Dak Prescott as a way to get access to this game. I will say, though, however, I do find interest in paying for the most expensive quarterback on DraftKings this week, and Patrick Mahomes, who is $7K on DraftKings. And I think he's going to go overlooked because he is playing the Las Vegas Raiders. They're expected to win by 11.5 points. And people look at that spread and they automatically think, oh, well, play the running backs because they're going to be playing from ahead and they'll run the ball a ton. No, Kansas City, it has an awful run game. Their run game is just bad. And it's partially because of the running backs, but I frankly don't understand what is happening with their run game. It should be good, but it's not.
And their best running back is Patrick Mahomes right now.
Exactly. And Patrick Mahomes has been getting it done with his legs. Now, I don't think we'll see maybe necessarily as much rushing upside for Mahomes in this game because they should be ahead and dominating, but we've seen the Vegas Raiders give the Kansas City Chiefs a hard time here and there, so it may force Mahomes' hand, but I could see him getting there on pass volume alone. He has had multiple consecutive games of 20 or plus fantasy points on DraftKings, and I don't think people are paying attention to it. I think they're still on this, like, there's just still a little bit of this, like, oh, like Patrick Mahomes is like the old thing now. We're not excited about his potential upside. Also, he gets Rashee Rice back this week, which I will talk about more in a minute. So I feel like this offense is starting to fire on all cylinders, and we should not assume that they're going to just run the ball because they'll be winning.
And the last thing I'll add, I don't have the numbers in front of me. Mahomes destroys the Raiders throughout his career. It's a pastime of his. So no, I like that a lot. With me, Austin, like I said, if I had thought more about this last night before our show ended or after our show ended last night, I would have probably pivoted because we were shooting in the morning. I went with Caleb Williams, and I can give you all of the reasons I like Caleb Williams. And most of those reasons are, first of all, he's playing sneaky good football right now. Also getting it done with his legs, which was kind of a surprise from him last year, and he is continuing that into this year. But then you look at the Saints as an opponent. This is a team that gave up 18 points to Kyler Murray, 23 points to Mac Jones, 16 to Sam Darnold, 24 to Josh Allen. This is their whole season, 17 to Jackson Dart, and then 25 to Drake May. This was a game where Caleb Williams was going to eat, and I loved him with a 3-touchdown potential, Austin. Then I heard about this weather. And now I have to pay attention to this. If there's any hint of weather in GPP, I'm not running the risk if you build lineups the way I do. I don't know how many people are max entering watching our show. If you build lineups where you're building kind of, 2 or 3 lineups, I don't want to waste one on Caleb Williams, Austin, if the weather is going to take my quarterback out, because hitting on your quarterback seems requisite for winning in these tournaments.
Yeah, I think that is very fair. I feel like I play probably in all about 8 different lineups every week because I between DraftKings FanDuel and doing snake drafts on Underdog. So because of that, and I'm playing like a decent volume, I probably will have a Caleb Williams lineup, and I will probably do something where I have every week, like the way I just like break up how I'm divvying up my bankroll. I have $1 that I put into whatever the largest single entry dollar contest is. So that is like my long shot. That is where I get the most, where I play a lineup that I guess I feel like has maybe the lowest floor, but has the highest ceiling, and has the highest way of getting different. And that's probably where I will play this Caleb Williams lineup this week, is to say like, okay, if Caleb Williams does pop, I want it to be in the contest where I can turn $100 or $1 into $1,500, and not in the contest where I'm trying to turn $3 into $42.
Yeah, no, I think it makes a ton of sense. So like I said, I don't know. I probably would have pivoted to one of Austin's guys. I feel like Dak is the easy one. I may have also went to Patrick Mahomes. I can't say who I would have taken. I still like the matchup a lot. And if this weather ends up being much ado about nothing, which it very well could be, I'm right back in on Caleb Williams. But right now, I'm a little nervous. And I kind of like the Bears defense as a pivot. But then again, there's a Caleb Bears defense stack here as well that would be a very different kind of stack. Austin, as we move on to running backs, you got I was going to say 3 options, but technically you have 4 options for us here. So.
Yeah, I think as the show has gone on this year, I've just been like, I need to talk about more and more and more players.
Yeah.
So we'll start with the players that I have that it's like just very clear. So first, I think it's interesting to look at Ja'Cory Cross-Merritt this week. $6,100 on DraftKings, $6,600 on FanDuel. This is a bit of a pivot off of Jaden Daniels, but it's also just recognizing that Dallas continues to be a really good matchup for opposing running backs. They are allowing the second most points to the running back position, which is interesting because I think last week they were still allowing the most, so they did do a little bit better last week. But they've by and large been rough against the running back position. Ja'Cory Cross-Merritt has been a little bit. I guess I would say like hit or miss.
Yeah.
He's been very touchdown reliant. Well, I think this is a good bounce back spot for him against a soft defense. So I like going that route as a way to get off of Jaden Daniels.
Big fan of Bill. That's I've kind of made that my hype train this season. Last week, 17 carries despite fumbles in the game. They are continually going back to him, and that's not for nothing. It looked like this was turning into a committee with Jeremy McNichols and Chris Rodriguez. It is very clearly shading towards Bill at this point. So
yes. No, I definitely agree with that. Now, for my next running back pick in this section, I looked at what you put down first for Jonathan Taylor, and I was like, dang, I really wanted to talk about Jonathan Taylor. But I decided, let me think about where you can pivot off of Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah.
I think Saquon Barkley is a really interesting play this week because the Minnesota Vikings are not going to show up as a team that gives up. Well, the Minnesota Vikings will not show up as a team that gives up a ton of points to the running back position. Since week 3, they've allowed 22 points per game to running backs, which ranks as the 15th most among all of teams on the slate this week.
Yeah.
They, however, have allowed a lot of yards to a lot of rushing yards. So just running through their 5 games so far, they allowed 119 rushing yards, 218 rushing yards against the Atlanta Falcons, Bijan Robinson, everyone. They then only allowed 53 rushing yards to the Cincinnati Bengals. Come on now.
Which is like double what they had been getting to that point. So
exactly. And then against the Steelers and the Cleveland Browns, they allowed 131 and 140 rushing yards. This could be the Saquon Barkley week that we have come to know and love. Could be a 30-40 point game. And I think people are not going to be in on it because we haven't seen him hit a ceiling. And the Eagles have seemed to really to like kind of stumble out of the gate this year. But I think this is a really good week to go and attack Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, bonkers analysis that I'm just coming up with as we're talking here. This was the Kenneth Gainwell game against Minnesota.
Yeah.
And Philly, this is going to sound ridiculous, is running a similar offense to Pittsburgh where they're just keeping it on the ground no matter what. And so if Minnesota's bleeding yards, Saquon Barkley's not a guy you want to bleed yards to. This could be a great game for Saquon. So
exactly. I love it. So my last running back is just pick a New England Patriots running back. And the reason I want to talk about this is in part because it's a really good matchup. So the Tennessee Titans, they're in a similar situation where they've been really leaky against running backs, and it's been worse in recent weeks. So they have allowed the third most points to running backs since week 3. The thing is, people are not going to want to play the New England Patriots running backs because who the heck?
They're not.
Which one of them is going to get the touches? And is either of them going to make it into the end zone? That's kind of why I want to play them. And it's especially why I want to play them in large field tournaments, because by leaning in and just taking
you'll be different.
You will be different. And especially if you're doing 3 entries or 20 entry contest, getting a little bit of both of them is a really good strategy this week, I think, because I think one of them will have a decent performance. They're both in that kind of 5K range. So they don't even have to do that much. If they score you 15, 20 points, they've done their job and you're able to do some interesting things with your lineup elsewhere.
Well, and you kind of lead in perfectly to my point is I may have to go weird with Ramondre Stevenson because I do love Jonathan Taylor this week. He's not my player, but the fact of the matter is, Austin, we learned last week eating chalk is sometimes the right decision when you're trying to win big bucks. And when I look at this, I talk about this every week. I look for multi-touchdown upside in this section. I don't know that any player has more multi-touchdown upside than Jonathan Taylor this week. And so I'm very much in on Jonathan Taylor, but my goodness, certainly if you're playing over on FanDuel, you got to do something to afford this guy. My next player doesn't make Jonathan Taylor any more affordable, but I also think he has a wonderful matchup against the Miami Dolphins this week, and that is Quinshon Judkins. Judkins has been a revelation for the Cleveland Browns. He seems to be the only thing going right for that team right now. I guess you could throw Harold Fannin in there. But when you look, this was kind of the point I was going to make. Remember when we discovered Rico Dowdle? That was against the Miami Dolphins. Remember when we discovered Kamani Vidal? That was against the Miami Dolphins. And then when you go back even further, they gave up points to Breece Hall. They gave up points to James Cook. They gave up points to Ramondre Stevenson. They're actually the only team to hold Jonathan Taylor in check, but that was back in week 1. I think this is a monster week for Judkins. And everything I hate about the Chicago game, Austin, if you guys are not geography familiar, the weather in Chicago is often the weather in Cleveland. Give me 25-mile-per-hour gusts in a game where I have Quinshon Judkins and a quarterback who's afraid to throw the ball downfield. I think this could be a monster game. He's been good this season. I think we might be talking about a Quinshon Judkins coming out party after this week.
Yeah, I could really see that. I really like the pick here. I think it's a good matchup to attack for sure.
Yeah, like I said, and all the weather stuff that I was bitching about before, I'm now happy about for Cleveland, just a little bit further down the lakes there. So let's go ahead and move on to wide receiver, and you and I are both playing kind of the stacks to start off this section.
Yeah, so first off, just get yourself a Dak stack. I don't know which one's going to be the best one. Probably George Pickens, but you could go with Ryan Thornoy as well.
Yeah.
I could see you going with CeeDee Lamb and just saying like he comes back and picks up right where we expect him to be.
I can't imagine Dallas brings Lamb back if he's not ready to play. Like there's obviously the worry that he's a decoy. We've seen that happen in the NFL so much, but you've held him out for this period of time. You bring him back when he's ready to help you win. So
yeah, no, I totally agree with that. So just all that to say, like if you play Dak Prescott, you have to stack him, especially because he's not getting it done with his legs the way he used to. No. Jordan Addison, I think, is another good tournament play. We already talked about him, but this is also a bring back on the Saquon Barkley pick. So playing Saquon Barkley and Jordan Addison is a really good way to correlate in that game. I want to talk in particular about Courtland Sutton because the Denver Broncos are going up against the New York Giants this week. And the Giants have been an interesting defense to go up against because they have a really good front seven. And so there are some ways in which they can create a lot of headaches for quarterbacks. However, Denver, according to ESPN, is number 1 in pass block win rate this year. So their offensive line has been crushing it in the pass block in the past game. It's a good O-line against a bad secondary. And so basically what I'm betting on here is the fact that the Giants, while they have a good front seven, they're not going to be able to get to Bo Nix the way they've been able to get to other quarterbacks. And their secondary is not their strong suit. That is where they are weak. And that is going to play well to Courtland Sutton, who's only 5,900 on DraftKings. We haven't seen a good pop game from him recently. I like betting on it this week.
No, I think that makes just a ton of sense because I was saying the same thing about Bo Nix last night. A lot of people were asking start-sit questions about Bo Nix. And I'm like, to add to Austin's points here, I also think the Denver defense is going to put them in such a position in this game that we could see a great game from Bo Nix. So
yeah, I see that too. The last receiver I have in this spot is to look at Rashee Rice. I think that he will go overlooked this week. And while I did not appreciate the free 4 shirts that were rolled out by the Kansas City players because my man made some bad choices and he deserved to be suspended and deal with the consequences of those choices, the team clearly supports them. And so they're clearly ready for him to come back and get him the ball. I could see them having him active early and often and being a really good volume play. As a reminder, Rashee Rice is often a cash consideration when he has been healthy because of the volume he gets. So I could see him, especially because, yes, he's coming off an injury, but he's also coming off a suspension. So it's like he's been healthy for a minute. He would have been ready to go. he might be a little bit more up to speed than you would think with a player coming off of being out.
Literally the point I was going to make is there is a misconception among fantasy managers that I think is going to be a edge in DFS this week. And that is Rashee Rice is hurt. And so I was trying to pull off a trade for Jamar Chase earlier this season. And the guy is essentially in tank mode it's a keeper league. And I offered him Rashee Rice as a part of a package. And he's like, man, if Rice wasn't suspended and hurt, I would make this trade. And I'm like, you understand 6 weeks off means he's probably not hurt anymore. And he looked great in the preseason. Like everything screams Rashee Rice is coming out of this thing 100%. He's angry. Again, I'm with you. Let's not glorify criminals. He's angry. The team is angry. I think Rashee Rice gets fed this week, and there is a large portion of the population that thinks he's hurt. And I'm like, oh, this is an edge this week. I love the Rashee Rice pick. Because I'm going Caleb Williams, I'm going to double down on my mistake and say you got to stack with Rome Odunze. I will remind folks, DJ Moore went to the hospital after his game against Washington, stayed in Washington, D.C. overnight. He's being listed as day-to-day. DJ Moore being out does help Rome Odunze. It probably helps Luther Burden. If you want to get real weird in this game, a Caleb Williams, Luther Burden stack, I think could maybe pay dividends this week because we saw one big game from Luther Burden already this season. But the player I've decided to go with, I'm going to pick on the matchup yet again, and that's going to be the Dallas Cowboys. Austin has already told you all the reasons that you attack the Dallas Cowboys. So I'm going to go Deebo Samuel. I think a lot of folks are immediately going to pop Terry McLaurin in their lineup. Austin, he's practicing. He's back. We don't even know if he's back yet. Deebo Samuel is not as cheap as I'd like him to be, especially coming off of that terrible game. But you've often pointed out to me, on the primetime games, they're not as quick to fix scoring. Yes. And so the fact that Deebo Samuel had 4 catches for 15 yards didn't really affect his scoring because the week before he had 8 catches for 96 yards and a touchdown. But that's exactly why I want to play him against Dallas. I think even if Terry McLaurin's back, there's plenty to go around in this game. I think Washington will be throwing the ball. And I think Deebo Samuel, we cannot forget, he's had 1 game under 5 targets this entire season. Whether McLaurin's playing or not, Deebo Samuel is a part of this offense, and Terry McLaurin coming back might actually free him up a little bit.
Yeah, no, I really like that pick. I think it's a good way to continue to kind of stack and correlate this game. So I love going towards Deebo Samuel. I meant to do this already, but I will also just shout out Chris Moore if Terry McLaurin does not play, because he got utilized pretty heavily in that game in primetime this past week. So I could see him being another sneaky play in large field tournaments.
100%. I said this on our Tuesday show. I said, I feel like once a season, I have to mention Chris Moore's name. Like this guy ends up on random teams and just has these pop games. But here's the thing. Chicago, bad defense. Dallas, worst defense. Yeah. If he's ever going to put 2 weeks together, it's these 2 weeks.
So, yes, totally agree with that.
Austin, we're moving on to tight end and in tournaments. I think you're okay paying for the chalk this week.
Yeah, I'm okay paying up for Trey McBride for sure this week. I feel like he's going to be one of the more reliable players. I will say the tight ends you're about to speak to, I think, are really good targets as well if you want to save money. But Trey McBride is an interesting play going up against Green Bay, who's allowed the 4th most points to tight ends since week 3. I think this game could go a little bit overlooked. I also think that Arizona will be playing from behind, and so he'll need to be getting the ball. He's just been getting really good target volume, is really honestly the thing too. And I feel like for some reason, I feel like he could go overlooked. Like I feel like people necessarily aren't like super excited about Trey McBride the way that they have been in recent years. But even if he's chalky, I'm fine with it because I could see him easily being the highest scoring tight end on the slate.
Yeah, and you've kind of alluded to it. And again, this actually was one where the weather doesn't worry me. If David Njoku's out, I'm going to have a lot of Harold Fanden in lineups this week. And again, I don't actually care about the weather for this specific play. I don't know if you folks have paid any attention to what's going on in Cleveland. You probably haven't. Kudos to you. Dylan Gabriel will not throw the ball downfield. He is keeping it within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage. It is very frustrating for Browns fans right now, but it is great if you have running backs, pass catching running backs or tight ends from the Browns. Harold Fanden, as Austin mentioned earlier, when David Njoku went out last week, Harold Fanden blew up in the second half. I think 11 targets by the end of the game was like the tight end 6, 7, or 8 for the week, something along those lines. In this game, even if there is weather, all that weather is doing, the Browns aren't going to go 1930 style football and run every play. They're going to have to throw the ball, and Dylan Gabriel is going to throw to his tight ends. But guess what? That's not even the player I wanted to talk about. Don't sleep on what Dallas Goedert has been doing in fantasy football lately. Somehow, the world is turned upside down, and Dallas Goedert is the primary passing option for the Philadelphia Eagles. Last year, you needed a wide receiver hurt for Dallas Goedert to matter. This year, Dallas Goedert needs to be hurt for a wide receiver to matter, apparently. Over the last 2 games, Dallas Goedert has 20 targets. 20 targets over the last 2 games. Over the last 4 games, Dallas Goedert has 5 touchdowns, Austin. This guy is eating the world up since coming back from injury. And then you get Minnesota's been tougher against tight ends. However, just their game before their bye in week 5, they gave up 2 touchdowns to the Cleveland Browns, 1 to Njoku, 1 to Harold Fannin. When you're looking at tight end, you're looking for touchdowns. And right now, this is screaming, and they did give up a touchdown to Drew Sample in week 3, the Minnesota Vikings. You're looking at a team that could easily give up points to the tight end. And you're talking about, as ridiculous as this sounds, the primary pass catcher for the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah, no, I'm very on board with that strategy. Dallas Goedert was someone I was looking to talk about in the section if you hadn't have already gotten them into the show sheet. The Minnesota Vikings have allowed the third most points to tight ends since week 3. They are, to your point, allowing a lot of points. I think too, the only other thing I would say about this is I think it's a really interesting way to stack this game by playing Saquon Barkley and Dallas Goedert, because if it's going to be just the
taking
two
all
of
of Philly's touchdowns.
Exactly. If it's just going to be those two, you're going to want access to that upside.
Nope. I love it. And of course, we can't finish up lineups without a defense. And Austin, you read my mind on this one. And especially if I'm right about this weather, I think you have easily the best defense on the slate right now, though I'm a little shocked at the price differences between DraftKings and FanDuel for our 2 defenses.
Yeah, I am too. So the Chicago Bears, they are $3,100 on DraftKings. They're $4,800 on FanDuel. They're the 3rd most expensive defense on FanDuel. FanDuel, I feel like personally, gets defense in a way that DraftKings does not get defense.
Or they pay attention to the weather reports.
Or that. Here's the thing. New Orleans ranks 31st in pass block win rate. They are not doing good at protecting the quarterback. And the Bears, while they don't rank super high in pass rush win rate. That's a nice alliteration. They are, however, they do have a good front 7. We've seen them be able to be disruptive in the pocket. And so what this is essentially a bet on is that they are able to put pressure on Spencer Rattler, get some sacks, maybe some turnovers. And if the weather is bad, that's going to play to the defenses all the more because the ball will be slippery. It means increased chances of fumbles. And the Bears, they seem to be coached in a way that they are looking to make big splash plays.
Yeah. For me, I could have just taken my script from week 1 and brought it to week 6 or 7 rather. You bet against rookies playing in their first game in Denver, even if that rookie has set the world on fire like Jackson Dart has. And for some reason, Austin, the Denver defense, which leads the NFL in sacks, they're up there in takeaways. I believe they're still the number 1 fantasy defense off the top of my head. On DraftKings, they're the 3rd most expensive defense. That still feels okay. For some reason, they are the 8th most expensive defense on FanDuel. So I don't understand what's going on there. If FanDuel is right, then what the hell, man? So I don't know. But if I can get into Denver, certainly on FanDuel for this cheap, I'm taking that opportunity every time. I know Dart has looked really good. But do you know what else has looked really good? Denver's defense against almost every quarterback they played. Don't forget it was Denver's defense who just held Justin Fields to 5 fantasy points. And you're like, oh yeah, well, it was a shitty game by Justin Fields. That's actually the 2nd game this season, Austin, that they've held a quarterback to 5 fantasy points. The other was Jake Browning, but that's neither here nor there. That's twice this season they've held a quarterback to 5 fantasy points. I like the price point of Denver. I'm fine with them on DraftKings. I'll probably go cheaper on DraftKings. But on FanDuel, Denver will be my lineup builder over on FanDuel. So.
Yeah, I know. I think that's a perfectly great strategy. And I feel like with Denver, I think it's easy to forget that they are the best defense in the league. They do have the best roster. Yeah. And there is no pass catcher for the New York Giants right now. That scares me against Pat Surtain and the rest of their secondary. It's just it's going to be hard for the Giants to move the ball. Maybe they'll get creative in some way, but I would bet on the Denver Broncos 9.5 times out of 10.
Well, and it's sort of what you alludes to. Obviously, the world's in love with Dart and Scatabo right now, but the Broncos are going to be able to man up the Giants pass catchers, which we're talking 8 in the box for Scatabo. He might run through the first guy, but I think the second guy is probably going to tackle him on this very talented defense. So again, I'm just use caution with the New York Giants love this week, folks. That wraps up the GPP tournament section. I hope you guys have enjoyed the show. We always wrap up the show with a head-to-head contest between me and Austin. We call it the valedictorian shootout. Austin, I'm on a streak right now. Now, you mentioned last week you went risky with your lineup. It did hurt you in the overall score with 103 points, but you still had a win within your grasp because I was awful last week at 107 points, but I do make it 4 in a row. You're 2-4 right now. I'm 4-2. Basically this came down to, Austin, you bet on Hassan Haskins. If you had picked Kamani Vidal instead of Hassan Haskins, you win this by 10 points. And then at quarterback, you punted at quarterback. And I actually want to talk about one more thing I did this past week in cash. You punted at quarterback with Dylan Gabriel. I went with Bryce Young. It worked out well for me. By the time I got to my cash lineup, Austin, Joe Flacco started looking really, really interesting to me. And I feel like I don't know that I'm going to be comfortable punting on quarterback in these cash plays anymore. I think I need to play it safe. I get the strategy of playing safe everywhere else, but then Puka Nacua gets hurt and you just look like an idiot. So.
Yeah, no, I feel that. I mean, I thought about Joe Flacco too for a minute, and I agree with you. It is easy to think to like get into this mindset of like, oh, there's a 4K quarterback that's starting, I should just play them. But I feel like also this year we have learned like really depends on who the quarterback is. Marcus Mariota worked out. That matchup worked out for him. Joe Flacco, Dylan Gabriel last week, not so much.
And when you really think about it, though, that was a mistake on my part. Marcus Mariota worked out because of the defense he was playing. I don't remember who it was off the top of my head, but it wasn't great. It might have been Chicago. Oh, no, that was this past week. Never mind. But regardless, Joe Flacco against Green Bay was never a good play. I don't care how cheap he was. Dylan Gabriel against Pittsburgh was never a great play. I don't care how cheap he was. Like, we really need to think about that moving forward. And this week, now I went risky because of what I've talked about 8 times in the show, but you definitely, I think you have the better lineup this week, but neither here nor there. Let's announce our lineups. I'm going with Caleb Williams. Now, as we mentioned, we record this show on Thursday. This is just game theory between me and Austin. We cannot change these lineups because we're announcing them to you guys. It's all for fun anyway, and hopefully bragging rights for me at the end of the season. So I'm going with Caleb Williams. I'm worried about the weather there, but I get to come right back with Quinshon Judkins. I try to treat this specific lineup with my extra players that I haven't mentioned in the show as a cash lineup. So I love Javonte Williams this week. I'm stacking Caleb with Roma Dunze. I'm going with Deebo Samuel, my pick, and then Olave fit in there because it was a game bring back. That's going to be my downfall. I can tell you that right now. But guess what, Austin? I fit your Cortland Sutton in. I went with Harold Fannin, and I got my Denver defense in. So Caleb, Judkins, Javonte Williams, Roma Dunze, Deebo Samuel, Chris Olave, Cortland Sutton, Harold Fannin, and the Denver defense. And I noticed we have a few picks in common here.
I was about to say, you don't need to worry about some of your decisions because I think we'll just cancel each other out. Yeah. So I'm going with Jaden Daniels at quarterback. I feel very comfortable just paying up for him, and I think there's a low chance that I move off of Jaden Daniels this week. He will probably be my quarterback I play on Sunday. Got 2 running backs looking at Rico Dowdle and Jordan Mason. They both fit that nice medium price range, so it's able to allow me to fit a lot of studs in my lineup, including Roma Dunze, Chris Olave, Jordan Addison, and Keenan Allen. So we will have two receivers cancel each other out this week, guaranteed. I also went with Harold Fannin at tight end, and I fit in the New England Patriots defense. Just hoping that they just keep doing what we expect teams to do against the Titans.
Yeah, you kind of saved me by going Odunze and Olave, but I think in a way that still hurts me because I'm also betting on the quarterback. I guess if the weather's fine, I have a great chance here because we're both in on that game and I have the quarterback from that game. If the weather's not fine, you have Jaden Daniels and you win handily. And as we mentioned, folks, you can actually play with us. And not only do you have a chance to win our $2, but you also have a chance, and it's more than $2, there's more people in the contest, but you also have a chance to have your name announced on the show. Austin, I gave a hard time about how we kept losing to ERT on FanDuel last week. I guess I need to put that same hit out on OTA top Troy, who takes down the DraftKings contest, back-to-back wins, his 12th win all time, and he is our top player on DraftKings. I think it's his 3rd win of the season. So OTA top Troy takes it down to 153 points. The one thing I noticed, Austin, I don't know if scoring was way up in week 5 or if it was just way down in week 6, but these scores were very low compared to who had won these contests in week 5. Familiar name, Mathis Golden, first win of the season, takes down the FanDuel contest. And again, you'll find links in the description of this video and in our DFS articles that we put out to join those contests if you guys would like to have a chance to win win yourself a couple of bucks, have your name announced on the show. That wraps up the Week 7 DFS Academy. Austin, let folks know the DFS content you're putting out here at Club Fantasy.
Yeah, make sure you join us here every Thursday and every Friday for our 2 weekly DFS shows. On Thursdays, Josh Hudson and I break down the Thursday night football showdown slate. And on Fridays, you can catch me and Ryan here every week, breaking down the main slate for Sunday. And of course, join the Discord. Come talk DFS with us. We'll help you set lineups. We'll celebrate our wins together. Support each other through our losses, etc. Come, it's a fun time. Link to join that Discord is in the show description.
Perfect. And we do put out 2 DFS-esque articles every single week. I put out a matchup report every Wednesday that shows the last 4 games, teams that are giving up the most and fewest points to every position. And we take this show sheet and turn it into an article. So if you didn't have a chance to watch the episode, or you just want a reference point when you're building your lineups on Sunday, you'll be able to find that all at clubfantasyffl.com. This show is a pre-record. If you comment, we will answer back in the comments, but the best place to find us in the Discord. The next time Club Fantasy will be live is tomorrow morning. Start, sit, different day. We spend an entire hour only answering your start, sit questions. And if you throw some DFS in there, they'll take good care of you there too. For Austin, I'm Ryan. Thank you guys for tuning in. Good luck on your lineup building. Hopefully your redraft season isn't over, but if it is, DFS is still there for you. We'll see you guys next week.